So life consists of many varied patterns. There's a multi-layered give and take of contrary forces that make up everything about our existence. And the Chinese called it Yin and Yang. I'm always referring to it. It's dualism, duality. Lately, I've been calling it the dance of contrasts. And I'm always talking about it because I feel it's so fundamental to our experience, and it shocks me that more people aren't constantly talking about it. Because I think when you have a firm grasp on how things are really operating, whether it be the nature of physics, whether it be your spiritual beliefs, your philosophy, whether it be your understanding of your intimate partners, your friends, your family, your relationships, your job. There are themes that are constant, and when you know about them, it is my opinion that it gives you tools and a leg up in the world. And I want to kind of give you, to the best of my ability, my understanding of how things operate. And this pattern that's so often overlooked by even the most brilliant minds in our society should really don't talk about it as much as I feel they do. And it's crazy to me that, especially in fields such as engineering, when you are constantly dealing with scientific facts and the processes at which so many of our theories and our observations of the elements and, for example, frequency. When you deal heavily with phenomena such as frequency, how is it that you don't marvel at the fact that, down to a very basic fundamental truth such as that's so prevalent in the makeup of what we experience, seeing the contrast, the constant give and take of the frequency, how does it not clue you in to the nature of this phenomena that I'm talking about as far as duality goes? Um, Let me go into that for a minute, because what I'm talking about, in case all this sounds really strange and not super duper helpful, let me share the screen here. When you look at a frequency wave, wave frequency is the number of waves that pass a fixed point in a given amount of time. The SI unit for wave frequency is blah, 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 wave passing a fixed point in 1 second, blah, 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 blah. But if you look at it, this is a very good fundamental case in point of what I'm speaking about. So when you visually represent what a wave frequency is, you have what appears to be something pulling at it in one direction, and then something else pulling at it in the other direction, on and on and on until infinity. And although it's zigzagging in two completely different directions, there's a harmony formed by the two different directions that form the wave. It's like a cooperation of two very contradictory forces. And like, I'm not getting super scientific here, I understand that, but I'm just symbolically appreciating what tends to be the case in every aspect of our lives, in every aspect of our human experience in the physical world. And I'm not just going to talk about this observation of mine because I don't think that that's super helpful. I want to, after I've given you a few key examples of what I'm constantly seeing when I wake up in the morning, these patterns, I want to also then apply this understanding to help make practical use of this information. And hopefully that'll be intriguing for you, and it can kind of help you in your day-to-day struggle through this thing that we call life. So let me give you a couple more examples. I mean, the obvious ones are light, dark, night, day. I'm all the time going on and on. Happiness, sadness, pleasure, pain. I mean, it's really infinite, the amount of examples of duality and this dance of contrasts. But when you when you think about it, here's something that's super important to every single one of us. That's a really good example of what I'm talking about. It's the heartbeat. A single complete cycle of contraction and dilation of heart muscle. Yeah, that's I don't think it gets more important than that to all of us personally. Your heart, in order to circulate our blood, there's an electric signal of some kind that makes it boom 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 boom. So it's so it's tightening essentially and then loosening. It's a back and forth motion that we're only vaguely aware of. We certainly don't have conscious control of it. This is something that happens completely divorced from whether or not we want it to or are trying to make it happen. It does it all on its own. Which, if that's not a clue as to how important this push and pull, this give and take of, and you might be thinking, well, Parker, just because things tend to go back and forth just because life and so many other things rest on the motion of two different directions, just because you've observed this as being the case, why are you making such a big deal out of it? How do you then go, okay, well, here's an example of this phenomena that's ever present in our existence. How do you go from that to saying that it's significant philosophically, I guess? Well, I think it's just the overprevalence of this pattern, and I think that just the similarity between the notion of things going back and forth in a frequency or in motion like this, the similarities between that and the philosophies of dualism are just so strikingly similar. And when you're constantly seeing this repeating pattern over and over and over and over again in everything conceptually possible, it just, I have somehow gotten to the point where I've combined them all into the same phenomena. And I don't think I'm wrong in doing that when you think about how important this ends up being, not just to the nature of how things work, but also our mentality. Let me go on, show you a couple more that I feel are super important. What else do I have here? Well, I guess I'll go ahead and read off, in case you guys aren't familiar with the Yin and Yang. In ancient Chinese philosophy, Yin and Yang, bright, black, positive, negative, is a concept of dualism describing how seemingly opposite or contrary forces may actually be complementary, interconnected, and interdependent in the natural world, and how they may give rise to each other as they interrelate to one another. So, oh yeah, another. This is super important, and I think it was a huge revelation that's been incredibly important to mankind, and I'm a huge fan, obviously. But there was another example that I thought was super important to bring up in this video before I go forward. The seasons are probably one of up there in importance to humans and all life on this planet. Actually, the seasons are very predominantly important, and it's another example of this give and take, or this law of contrasts, because when the Earth is orbiting the sun, it's honestly quite striking to me, and very beautiful, and people should spend more time really contemplating how perfectly things are just kind of set up. Because half of the time, so the Earth is always on a tilt, and you guys, I'm sure, are aware of how the seasons happen, and how the Earth orbits the sun, but just bear with me for a second. The Earth is tilted in such a way that when it's on one side of the sun, the southern hemisphere is somewhat closer, or more predominantly being shined upon by the sun. And it keeps that tilt even when it goes to the other side of the sun. So that the other half of the year, now the northern hemisphere is more predominantly being shined on by the sun. And it's just such a beautiful, perfectly balanced give and take, back and forth, of being bathed by the sun's radiance, that causes half of the year to be warmer on the northern hemisphere, and then vice versa on the southern hemisphere, to create our seasons. And just the fact that just the fact that we don't all experience winter and summer at the same time, depending on where we're located on the planet. This half of the planet, you get summer this time. This half of the planet, you get summer the opposite time. Again, opposite being key. I'm highlighting that word because so much of everything that we experience rests on this phenomena of dualism, this contrast, this balance, this harmonious give and take, the dance of contrasts. Now, I want to bring that home and actually talk about how this understanding has greatly improved my life and how it could potentially improve your life. So, I guess first of all, we will talk about people and our relationships. I think that naturally we are inclined to be very attracted to people who very delicately contrast us. Obviously, in order to maintain a healthy relationship, we have to relate on some pretty key fundamental levels. We have to be able to relate to each other. So we have to be similar enough to relate in some very core ways. But apart from that, we end up being very well complemented or attracted to people who contrast us in very fundamental ways as well. And I think if you look back on the most intense / rewarding relationships that you've had, they were people that you could relate to, yes, but they were also people that contrasted you in very unique and interesting ways, and they challenged you. And that's a good place to be in, I think, when you're dealing, when you're going to make a decision on who you want to have in your life. Echo chambers are boring and not productive, and they don't encourage growth. you can end up being complacent, and then you've got a whole list of problems that come along with that. More importantly, though, when you notice these patterns and you notice this give and take, you start to see it also in human behavior. When you come to the realization that people go through phases, they go through moods, it's helpful to keep that in mind before you make rash decisions. For example, you know, you may have a loved one or a friend who's awesome, and they can be predictable in their personality part of the time, but then sometimes they come at you with this crazy energy that's it could be jealous, it could be anger, it could be sadness, uh, you name it. It's important to remember that just like the sun orbiting, or sorry, the Earth orbiting the sun, people have dips and rises in their mannerisms, their attitudes, their moods. And if if maintaining that relationship is important to you, you got to remember just to kind of ride it out until things come around again in the way that you prefer, or the way that's more. It's good to ride out the bad times, the negative waves of emotion, because those good waves are coming too. Those people, generally speaking, aren't miserable to be around all the time. It's unlikely that they are if you pursued them to begin with. Like if they were miserable all the time, it's unlikely that you would have even attempted to be around them in the first place, right? So it's good to remember that and to ride out those waves if the relationship is important to you. But going further than that, our friends are the same way, our employers are the same way. Try not to make a rash decision or say something that you're going to regret based on some really erratic, horrible behavior, because people have bad days. People have bad weeks. Hell, sometimes people have bad months. But if you can ride that out, 9 times out of 10, you'd be glad that you did, without making things worse for yourself. There was another really, really important train of thought along these lines. Oh, yeah. I personally feel that given these fundamental contrasts and these frequency waves, these ups and downs, that's just interwoven into every aspect of our reality, it only makes sense that events and, we'll say, good fortune, bad fortune, is the same way. And what I mean by that is good times come and go, bad times come and go. It's important to remember when you're having the worst day or the worst week of your life to hang in there, because as I've tried to illustrate, these ups and downs are absolutely, there's no avoiding them. They're fundamentally a part of our experience. So when things get bad and those dips happen, you wreck your car, someone you love dies, etc., etc. I mean, it's really important to remember that nothing in life goes down and then just continues to go down, essentially, is what I'm saying. Good days will come, again. And that is not to say that we shouldn't mentally prepare ourselves for our twilight years, because part of that wave, that give and take, is our eventual demise. And, everything that starts must have an end. And obviously, that is one thing that we don't bounce back from. And that's sort of the end of our ride on this frequency wave. But the mere fact that we know that day is coming, I think should inspire us to make the best of the time that we have and dance when the music is played. Alan Watts, who, if you've never listened to him, I highly recommend. He talks about the importance of music and dancing, because he, very much like me, doesn't just look at things at face value. He sort of intellectualizes them and symbolically picks them apart. So when a person is dancing, they are going left to right, left to right. There's a swaying that happens that perfectly mirrors the frequency wave, the give and take, the dualism, yin yang, duality. It's impossible for somebody to move their body in one direction forever. It's certainly not a dance. There's the back and forth that has to happen in order for dancing to occur. And the mere fact that the phenomena of dance exists at all, again, perfectly mirrors what the core of our experience is, what's really happening underneath it all, behind the scenes. We are a part of this give and take, and whether we like it or not. But dancing, I think, is celebratory. It's sort of a subconscious realization that we are along for this ride, and we're appreciative that we're along for the ride. And that's why I think dance is so beautiful. Here's another one, though. So I've been working on this painting. It's Lady Tremaine from Cinderella. It's a commission from somebody who wanted it done for their baby daughter's room. I'm not finished with it, but it's coming along pretty good. The reason I'm showing it to you is to illustrate something about light. Art is a really good example of this give and take of the contrasts, because someone who's making dynamic and compelling art knows how to make beauty from contrasts. So I chose a gold curtain background because I knew that it's going to contrast the purples and blues very well. Because certain colors are on the other side of the color wheel, and when you put them together in certain ways, it's visually appealing. And I can only speculate that the reason why it's visually appealing is because we're aware of this give and take that's behind everything, and we're aware of the truth of it. All right, and so if you look at her face also, you see the battle of light and shadow. So parts of the face that are closer to the viewer, generally speaking, depending on where the light is going to be brighter. It's going to be fighting back the darkness more predominantly. The nose is going to be brighter depending on where the light is. And it's going to be more pronounced than the recesses, the parts of the face that are farther from the viewer, because you have dark on one side, you have light on one side because the light is in this direction somewhere. And that again illustrates this battle, this dance, the yin and yang. And it's everywhere, it's inescapable, it's fundamental, and it's also beautiful. And more people need to understand it, acknowledge it, and hell, even talk about it once in a while. Wouldn't kill you. All right, well, I hope this has been somewhat enjoyable and informative, or given you something to think about. I'm going to end the video now because my computer is not actually plugged in and the battery's going to die. But I had a lot of fun doing this. Hopefully it wasn't super, I don't know, condescending, or I didn't ramble too much, or wasn't too preachy. I'm going to do this some more. I'm also very shortly going to start, what's the word? Cataloging my favorite parts from other, like, different various religions and their religious myths and stories from around the world that I find to have truth in them, that are significant, and have helped me shape my worldview. I'm even going to be doing this for Christianity and the Bible, which is surprising even to me, because growing up the way I did put a very bad taste in my mouth towards the Bible and Christianity. But as I've gotten over all of that, even the Bible I consider to have some very crucial archetypical stories in them that are significant and can help give us perspective and even improve our lives. All right, guys. Thanks again. Faithful Slave, I'm out.